This is breaking news.
Hey, good morning. I'm Chris Wragge with some breaking news. A federal judge has officially dismissed the corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Judge Dale Ho reviewed filings from the parties and a court-appointed legal expert. His decision today means the charges are now dropped with prejudice, which means they cannot be filed again. Adams was indicted back in September, accused of accepting illegal campaign contributions and travel perks. The DOJ moved to drop the case, saying it interferes with Adams' 2025 mayoral campaign and his ability to cooperate with President Trump's immigration crackdown. That being first and foremost. Joining me now to discuss is political reporter Marcia Kramer with more on what this means for the mayor.
Well, before we get to that,
yes, let's hear.
There's now just in from the mayor's lawyer, Alex Spiro, who says, quote, "The case against Eric Adams should never have been brought in the first place. And finally today, that case has gone forever. From day one, the mayor has maintained his innocence, and now justice for Eric Adams and New Yorkers has prevailed." Now you ask, what does this mean? Well, it comes at a very fortuitous time.
Yes.
Because tomorrow at midnight is the filing deadline for Democrats to file their petitions to run for mayor. So the question is the mayor going to file his petitions tomorrow and run as a Democrat, or keep his options open and run as an independent or as a Republican? But the thing that's so important about this, Chris, is the fact that now the mayor can run and say, I'm not beholden to Donald Trump, because the judge decided that the Trump administration can no longer say they could bring the case back in the fall or any other time.
With prejudice, obviously, meaning, as you just mentioned, they cannot refile. At one time, Paul Clement, who was kind of the special counsel who was brought on board by Judge Ho to oversee this, said basically, you've got to drop this with prejudice. Otherwise, it's going to look as though he's got continued political pressure on him with this reelection. Now, with that gone, and we know Mayor Adams has been adamant the last few weeks since the DOJ stepped in to say, hey, let's just drop this so I can concentrate on a reelection campaign. I guess for him, this is the best news he could have been given.
Well, the other thing is it also silences some of the other people in the race, his critics, who are saying you're beholden to Donald Trump. It takes away a whole level of argument. So the other thing I will tell you is that the mayor, who had an availability yesterday, was questioned closely about whether he's going to start campaigning, and he maintains the fact that he's already campaigning because he's the mayor, and he goes out and he talks to people every day, he has events every day, and therefore he doesn't need to go out and campaign like everybody else who are also Rams in his mind.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, though. But does you say this takes away a little bit of ammunition from some of the people that are going to be running against him? Does it actually take that away, or can they still kind of say, well, come on, this is obvious. The DOJ stepped in to throw you a lifeline on this. The evidence was there, potentially, if this had gone to court. Who knows how it would have played out?
Well, I mean, look, you raised a good point. People in politics will go for anything that they can. But now the question is, how does he run? There was a point yesterday when he was talking and making attacks on Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani, and I was thinking to myself, well, maybe he's going to run as an independent because he's had a whole bunch of ammunition against Andrew Cuomo, and if he ran as an independent, he thinks he's going to face Andrew Cuomo in a general election. It remains to be seen what he does, but I can tell you one thing. I had a private conversation with him just a week ago, and he said to me, there's going to be more twists and turns in this election than you could ever imagine. So I guess the word is stay tuned for the twists and turns.
Anybody who thinks that this is a done deal obviously is not paying close enough attention. You've had a chance to review this case over the past, it seems like, years. With what was stacked against the mayor, what were your thoughts on some of the charges that were levied against?
Well, the basis of the charges was the fact that he alleged to have taken upgrades for flights and hotels when he went to Turkey and other places from the Turkish Airlines, and that was alleged to be in exchange for speeding up the approval of building permits for the Turkish embassy. So there were a lot of people who, including his lawyer, who said that these were false charges because almost every elected official who travels gets bumped up. Normally, it wasn't a quid pro quo. That was their argument. And that's why he says the charges never should have been brought.
Even Marcia Kramer has had that happen to her on flights. People see you when they move you right to the front of the plane.
I have not.
Don't be modest. And let me ask you about the relationship with the White House now moving forward, because, again, the relationship between Adams and President Trump and the administration, Tom Homan, the immigration czar, it seems to have warmed, obviously, over the past few months. But now that the bootstraps straps have been lifted up here, and now everybody seems to be on the same page. No more legality.
You know, Chris, it's sort of interesting that you asked that question, because just last night, the mayor filed suit against the Trump administration. He joined a suit that was filed by the Attorney General of the state of New York and 22 other attorney generals to challenge cuts to the health department that have been made by Robert Kennedy Jr. and President Trump. And this is, I mean, it's the second time he's filed suit, but this is the first major suit where he's saying these cuts will decimate city services. And they issued a statement saying that when New York City's rights have been violated, I'm not going to hesitate to go after Trump.
And I guess now, moving forward, his polling numbers have not been very strong, to say the least. So what do you think now happens with the Democratic primary just a few months away?
Well, you know, it remains to be seen. I mean, now he has a lot of work to do. He has to convince people that he's been running the city, that he's kept people safe. And, you know, the one thing that he said that I think is really important, he goes, it's one thing to say you want to be mayor. It's another thing to actually be mayor and have to deal with these problems. And he does cite dramatic drops in crime since he took office in January 2022. And in fact, just today, Police Commissioner Tisch has been bragging about even further drops in crime. Shootings are down, violence is down, subway violence is still an issue. Yep,
exactly. He was mentioning those numbers, double-digit decreases in a number of those categories. Let's bring in for more legal insights right now, Hofstra Law Professor, our good friend James Sample, who's standing by for us. James, good to have you with us. James, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, there you are. Okay, if you can explain to our viewers the difference between a case being dismissed with and without prejudice quickly.
So the initial proposal here was to dismiss this case without prejudice, which would have given the Department of Justice and the Trump administration the opportunity to bring the case back again. And that was, in some senses, perceived to be a kind of keeping Mayor Adams on a leash. If a case is dismissed without prejudice, then that means that it can be brought again. If it's dismissed with prejudice, that's the end, full stop. And in this instance, as Marcia just indicated in conversation with you, because it is now dismissed with prejudice, it's actually even more of a sort of complete win for Mayor Adams.
And let me ask you this. Judge Ho's hands essentially tied. Once the DOJ really stepped in, there was not much he could do. And I think this conclusion that we obviously was reached here a few moments ago was something that was kind of a foregone conclusion. Accurate?
I think that is accurate, Chris, and I think that, you know, he had limited discretion here to do anything other than what he really did do. And in fact, in a sense, he gave the Justice Department more than they even wanted, because I think that ultimately the dismissal without prejudice works to Mayor Adams' favor. I do disagree a little bit with one thing that Marcia said in the earlier portion of the discussion there, which is to say this case wasn't just about upgrades, right? It was also about hundreds of thousands of dollars in defrauding the city's campaign finance system. That is a significant thing that is not typical, right? You know, people may get upgraded on flights, they may get upgraded at hotels. Making the case just about that minimizes what is essentially defrauding. If the allegations prove to be true, and obviously we'll never know now because the case won't be brought, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars from New York City taxpayers.
Yeah, the straw donors was definitely a key component. Marcia, you've got a question for James?
I guess my question would be this. There have been a lot of papers that were filed, amicus briefs, and opinions that were also filed by an outside counsel that Judge Ho had hired. And I wondered what role you think that any of those opinions had. On the one hand, the amicus brief said, do not dismiss the charges. On the other hand, the outside counsel that he had hired said dismiss everything and dismiss it with prejudice. So what role do you think all these things played in swaying the judge to make a decision?
Well, certainly the brief and the arguments made by Paul Clement, the outside counsel he referenced, carried significant weight with Judge Ho, and he comes down in a place very similar. As Chris said, you know, Judge Ho was essentially told by Paul Clement that he had the limited discretion that Chris referenced earlier. So that played a major role. I do think that the amicus briefs that said don't dismiss this case at all, even though Judge Ho ultimately went in a different direction, you know, we're reading this opinion quickly as we're sort of live, and it literally just came out. It's 78 pages long. But if you read the opinion carefully, there is a lot in this opinion that looks quite unfavorable for Mayor Adams. It's a decision that goes in his favor with respect to the result because Judge Ho's hands are tied. But I think it speaks, the Department of Justice does not come off looking very good here, particularly when Judge Ho cites, for example, repeatedly the Danielle Sassoon letter that says that basically the Department of Justice is being dishonest in representing how this deal came about.
Well, see, that leads me to another question, Jim, and that is this, that there were a lot of resignations as a result of the decision by the Justice Department, and there are also questions that were raised by the prosecutors threatening that there could be a superseding indictment with other charges. So does that actually give more ammunition to the mayor's opponents to attack him when he runs for re-election, if he runs?
That question, the answer is absolutely yes, it does. And I think that, the Department of Justice, the attorneys who resigned, the attorneys who threatened to resign, Danielle Sassoon and others, indicating that there was going to be yet another superseding indictment, that there was, in essence, additional evidence that the Department of Justice had put and the SDNY prosecutors had put together that wasn't part of the initial indictment, is to say that the Trump administration stepped in and dismissed this case just as, at least in the eyes of the prosecutors, the case was getting even stronger than it was initially.
All right, James, stay with us for just a second. Before we do leave our broadcast friends here, just want to make a quick mention again from Alex Spiro, the attorney for Mayor Adams, just issuing this statement. Marcia referenced it before. The case against Eric Adams should never have been brought in the first place. And finally, today, that case is gone forever. From day one, the mayor has maintained his innocence, and now justice for Eric Adams and New Yorkers has prevailed, end quote. We want to take a moment to say goodbye to our broadcast audience. We will have the very latest details coming up later today on CBS 2 News at noon and at 5. And you can read the full judge's order on our website, cbsnewyork.com. We return you now to your regularly scheduled programming. We're going to continue streaming on CBS News New York. We'll see you there in about 15 seconds.
This has been breaking news.
And we welcome you back to our breaking news. The charges against Mayor Adams now dropped with prejudice, which means they cannot be filed again. Essentially, the mayor is scot-free from a number of charges that were levied against him. Marcia Kramer here with us now, providing analysis. James Sample is with us as well, Hofstra Law Professor. James, if you're still with us, we'll bring you in a second. But Marcia, let me just ask you this as we kind of reintroduce what's happened here over the last 15, 20 minutes. Best news, best case scenario for Mayor Adams right now.
Mayor Adams has got to be a very happy camper this morning because it frees him to decide what he wants to do politically. He could wait and decide to run as an independent, but there is a deadline approaching. Tomorrow at midnight, he must file petitions, over 3,000 petitions, to show that he could get onto the ballot. Now, when I asked him yesterday if he was going to file petitions, he said, let's wait. When we have an announcement, we'll make it. I think today or tomorrow we'll know whether or not he decides to run in a Democratic primary. But there are other options. He could run as a Republican. He could run as an independent, or he could decide not to run at all.
And what do you, I mean, in your heart of hearts, what do you think?
Well, he has said that he wants to run as a Democrat. But I will tell you this, that I had a conversation with one of his press people, and I said, is it possible that the mayor could run as an independent? And he said, stay tuned. Yes, it is. Now, yesterday, when he was talking about Andrew Cuomo, I had the feeling that he was thinking about the possibility of an independent run because he had chapter and verse about the things he wanted to attack about Andrew Cuomo, somebody he thinks he might face in a general election if Andrew Cuomo were to run the Democratic.
And there was kind of a seismic shift there, because I heard those comments yesterday. He seemed much more biting and much more direct in his criticism of people that he's going to potentially run against here in the coming weeks. Did you get a sense that he probably knew this decision was probably coming? I know that Judge Ho was up against a deadline with forms that needed to be filled out.
I don't know whether he knew, but I can tell you this. He's been very circumspect about not like having rallies or fundraisers or anything like that until the judge ruled. But he has stepped up his criticism of Andrew Cuomo, who is the poll leader right now in the Democratic primary, and it is gradually developed over the last several weeks, where he has really zeroed in to yesterday, where he really went after him, saying being governor is not like being mayor. Quote, you can't hang out in the mansion.
Yeah. Speaking of which, as far as public campaign events, whatnot, now that he'll start to pick that up, and now people obviously know the charges that were levied against him, the charges have now been dropped. The cold relationship with the federal government, now with a warm relationship with the federal government. How do you think he's going to be perceived as he now gets out there and starts running for re-election? As we have seen with a number of congressmen that have gone back to their constituents around the country, there are people that are angry, and angry people tend to be the loud voices in the back of the room. You think he'll deal with the same thing as he now tries to run for re-election?
I think everybody is angry, and I think he'll have to deal with that. But what he has to do now is go to voters and say he thinks he's been a mayor who delivered on his promise. Remember, when he was elected to fix public safety. Yeah. And in his mind, he has done that. He has, if you take a look at the crime stats from when he took office to now, there has been a dramatic drop in crime. We do have problems with subway violence, but in terms of shootings, in terms of violent crimes, in terms of rape and things like that, there have been dramatic decreases, and he's going to take credit for that.
Perception is the one thing he doesn't have a whole lot of control over. I know that still exists with a lot of people. I want to see, is James Sample with us now? James, you still with us? All right, we'll work on getting James reconnected here, because we'd like to talk with him here in just a second. There he is. James, you there?
Yes.
Great. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure you're with us. James, what do you think about all this as the mayor now is able to sidestep these corruption charges, basically get a free pass here, and he can now move on unobstructed as he tries to run for re-election? How do you think that's going to sit with the general population, people that are informed with what he was up against, and basically, I hate to talk about two tiers of justice, but it just seems as though those who have political influence or money do obviously get a different set of cards than most of us normal folks out there.
You may hate to say it, Chris, but I think you say it very well. I think that it's an important insight, and I think that there is certainly going to be a perception that, and there's a perception it's not just limited to Mayor Adams, but one of the things that is one of the defining characteristics of the Trump administration 2.0 in just this first 100 days is that if you are politically connected to Trump, if you can be, if he perceives you as someone who can do something for him, whether that means politically, whether it means legally, whether it means in the court of public opinion, he is very, very likely to play ball. And while here he doesn't get to, maintain that leash of we could bring these charges back, because now he can't bring those charges back, he does still have the sort of, the mob mentality of, it'd sure be a shame if, remember what I did for you, it'd sure be a shame if, I took my support away from you, wouldn't it? And I think to Marcia's point, he's now, Mayor Adams, that is now in a position of triangulating his support, which is to say that, to the extent that dyed-in-the-wool Democrats perceive him now as sort of under Trump's thumb, he's going to lose some support among Democratic voters, but he may get some support among Trump supporters who, make up a non-trivial portion of the New York City electorate.
Jim, I was wondering, as you've had time to peruse the decision that the judge has handed down, if there are any trouble spots that you've seen that could be problems for Mayor Adams as he tries to seek re-election, if he seeks re-election.
It's a good question, Marcia. I think legally speaking, the answer to that is no. I mean, legally speaking, he's innocent until proven guilty, and he will never be proven guilty. That is an unequivocal, it's rare when we can say things that definitively, but he will never face legal consequences for the allegations that are, that were against him in this case. And so legally speaking, I don't think that there's anything, but politically, his opponents, as you said, will definitely try to to make something of these charges atmospherically.
James, it seems as though across the board, whether you're speaking locally, whether you're speaking nationally, accountability, trust, things that were hallmarks, of the political system with people that you either vote, no matter what side of the aisle, you fall on. It just seems as though that's kind of gone by the wayside as we see a number of these cases that I think to some people say, I can't believe this, we're just kind of getting away scot-free here without being tried in the court of public, not court of public opinion, but in an actual court.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think that, certainly President Trump is the ultimate exemplar of that, right? Never tried ultimately on the January 6 charges, never tried on the classified documents charges. And now Mayor Adams never facing a jury. One can ask oneself, to your dual track rule of law point, is this how it works for the average citizen when the average citizen is accused of a crime? And I think the answer to that speaks for itself.
Can I just ask you about these machinations with Judge Ho for these past couple of weeks? I mean, as soon as the DOJ stepped in, I think for all of us, it seemed as though the decision was already rendered. So why go through the process, with hiring the special counsel here with Paul Clement? Why go through all those machinations here?
It's a really good question, Chris, and I think that the answer is that the process still matters. The result was pretty clear. The result was basically preordained. But this is a 78-page decision because he wants to go through it methodically. Hiring Paul Clement indicated a level of care and a level of not, Donald Trump wants to turn the entire criminal justice and federal court process into, the art of the deal. That's his moniker, right, for his book. I think Judge Ho wanted this to be really, really careful. He wanted to dot the I's, cross the T's, and make this a document that lasts in the court of history, not just in the court of public opinion today.
I have another question, Jim. Over the course of these negotiations, the lawyers for Mayor Adams argued that there were political machinations on the mind of the then U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, that he had a political motive. And they used that argument both before the court and also in the court of public opinion. Do you think that that played any role in the judge's decision?
No, I don't. And I think that realistically, speculating about the prosecutor's political motives, even though that speculation included some internal speculation at SDNY, I mean, if political motives on the part of political figures and legal leaders were disqualifying, we would never have U.S. attorneys who could bring cases if that disqualified. Because realistically, there are no actors, and that includes Emil Bove, it includes the president's defense counsel here, and it includes Mayor Adams, obviously. There are no players in this particular saga who don't have political motivation.
It just seems as though the playbook is now deny, no matter what you're up against, because it seems as though even if there was a mountain of evidence against you, not just in Mayor Adams' case, but in any person of power's case, you're basically going to skate.
It's the Roy Cohn playbook through and through. I mean, we've seen this just in the last 10 days or so with the Signal Gate, right? Deny that there was any sensitive information on the group chat. Deny, and then the information comes out, and you couldn't possibly have the definition of sensitive information more than was clearly there on the face of that group chat. But you still stick with the denial, and then you eventually try and get past the news cycle. That definitely, Chris, is the playbook.
Let me ask you both this question now. Now, as the mayor, let's say he is going to seek re-election. Let's, for a moment, say that is a foregone conclusion. What is his play now that he has been cleared of these charges, no longer has to worry about this now or in the future? Does he come out more aggressively, or does he take a breath and say, okay, you know what, we've got a new lease on life here? Here's the approach. I
think that he started trotting out what his defense is going to be yesterday when he said, I want to apologize to the New Yorkers who've had to go through this long ordeal and had to be subjected to this. So I think you're going to see a combination of aggressive, been a good mayor, I've reduced crime, I handled the migrant crisis, whatever, but also apologizing that New Yorkers had to go through this. I don't know whether they believe it, because remember, there are two sides of this coin. He's going to make his argument, and the 8 other people who are running for mayor are going to make their argument. They're going to be totally different.
Yeah, I think something tells me this is still going to come up on a debate stage, if it ever gets to a debate stage or whatever forum they're in. James, let me ask you, is that approach, it wasn't me, it was you, is that going to work?
Characterizing himself as the victim here, and I'm sorry that you two voters had to suffer along with me, is a bit of a reach. But these days, it may well work. It's hard to say it won't.
It's the Donald Trump school of how you deal with things. Come on, Jim.
Yep. Absolutely.
If it works for one, it might work for the other. It'll be very interesting to see, though, exactly how this all plays out. In summation, I'm going to pose this, James, to you before we let you go. In summation, you hear of what happened this morning before we wrap things up here in the last 60 seconds. Your final thoughts, James.
It's a victory for Mayor Adams in the sense that, not in the sense that it means that he did right and did no wrong here, but it's a victory in the sense that he can move past this. And for the Department of Justice, it is an affirmation of the significant power of the executive.
All right, Hofstra Law Professor James, thank you very much. James Sample, we appreciate you taking a few moments for us. As always, greatly appreciate your insight. And Marcia, final thoughts for you before we say goodbye here.
Well, I think it's going to be buckle your seatbelts and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride the next couple of months, huh?
Oh, my God.
Okay, charges have officially been dropped in the Eric Adams corruption case, as we've been talking about here for the last half hour or so, with prejudice, which means those charges cannot be brought again. For Marcia Kramer, I'm Chris Wragge. We'll have updates throughout the day on CBS News New York, and we'll, of course, update you coming up at noon. Now we send you back to regular programming.